I ended up laying on the grass outside of my apartment in a field, staring up at the sky every day for like a month, just going, what just happened? And what is this world? And what is this industry? And who am I? We're back, baby, with a brand new season of the It's Fucking Spiritual podcast. Join us each week as we have unfiltered conversations about how to transform your life. Our mission is to usher in a new era of spirituality where you don't have to be all love and light to live a life of alignment. Here, we honor all of it, the profound and the profane, the magic and the messy, and all things that make you human. So let's discuss the truth behind transformation and be unapologetic in our evolution. From manifestation to money, embodiment to energy, and all taboo topics, nothing is going to be off limits. Are you ready to live a life that feels just as good as it looks? Let's get fucking spiritual. All right, you guys, welcome back to a brand new season of the It's Fucking Spiritual podcast. This is so long overdue. I accidentally took a year off. I thought it was going to be a couple weeks, and I went through the greatest initiation of my entire life. So I'm really excited to be back with you today and to share my heart and my truth and the wisdom that I've received over this year and tell you more about how this is all transformed and changed and how I've personally evolved in my life, and hopefully have that as a mirror for you and how you've evolved. And I'm here today with one of my best friends who has been on this journey with me, and he is an amazing leader in his own right. And he has so graciously offered to be here with me today and just almost be a buffer for me as I'm sharing my truth and my transformation with you. And his name is Brad Barnes, and Brad is here with us today. Hi, Brad.
Hi.
Hi.
I feel like it's been a year, yet also a day.
Yeah.
I don't know how it's been a year. Literally almost to the week.
I know. A year since we met.
Right.
A year since a little over a year since I moved to Austin, and a year since everything changed and transformed and eventually fell apart and got rebuilt better. And it's crazy.
Okay. Why don't we start with where the fuck you've actually been?
Okay. Okay. Yes. And also, I love too that just for you guys listening to this, obviously it's different. We're on camera now. I've never been on camera before. This is fully produced as a show. And Brad and I actually sat down to do one of these. When was that? In August, maybe?
Sure.
Yeah, sometime at like the end of the summer. I was thinking I was ready, and I kept trying to force it, and I kept trying to but I need to be on some arbitrary timeline. I need to be back with everyone and producing, and it just wasn't the time for it. And it was because I was in the most massive awakening of my life. And I will be sprinkling this in and sharing more about it in the episodes to come. But I guess to start with where I was.
Right.
Okay. So as you all know, at the end of the last season, I had just moved to Austin. And at the time where I was, my business and my podcast took off really fast. In 18 months, we were top 12 spiritual podcast. We were approaching 500,000 downloads. I was approaching that in my business as well. Like, my business really took off. And, I do what many, many other online entrepreneurs do, which is I'm going to go straight to the heart of Austin, Texas, where everyone is, right? And I had this vision and this dream that I would scale my company, and I would start interviewing people. Mm-hmm. And I really wanted to, make a name for myself in this industry. I wanted to affect more people. I had this really big mission and vision, and wanted to be surrounded by people who were also in this industry and doing really big, beautiful things. And I didn't have that in Houston, which is where I was before, even though it's a few hours away. It was like I was a fish out of water before, right? Like I was, I would have my coaching bubble and I would coach during the day, and then I would go back with my friends who had no idea this language or any of that. And so I really yearned for a space where my worlds were coherent.
Right.
And I lived in one world, and I could have people over and the podcast and all of that. And I came here very like bright-eyed and excited and just really didn't know what I was in for. And essentially didn't know what I would uncover and illuminate within myself and within my own psyche. And we'll get into that as well. But essentially what ended up happening is everything was taking off really fast. And I, looking back now, know that my nervous system wasn't regulated enough to hold the bigness that was coming in, one. But two, I got thrust into this world in really, really fast. And I started working with a super popular mentor in this space, and was being brought to all of these different events. And suddenly I found myself meeting all of the people that I once looked up to. And in that, it was so beautiful. It was like so expansive. All of the conversations were amazing. Like it was really cool to be in spaces where I'll never forget. I remember I went to an event once and I looked around the room. This had to have been like February of this year. And I looked around the room and I realized I followed about 80% of the people in there.
Wow.
And it was a private event, and it was jarring to me. Because one, like that's a lot, to be like, whoa. And it was leaders in this industry. And it's like, oh my gosh, all of my dreams are coming true. And I'm being introduced to all these people. And it was so beautiful. So I don't want to say that it wasn't. It was so beautiful and amazing. But there was also an energy of like, who do you know? And how many followers do you have? And there was like an underbelly that I was also sensing. And I don't think that I was ready or prepared for that. And this is not the result of like one specific person, or this isn't to say this is reflective of the entire industry. But it was a very like social climbing. It was just an interesting, sticky feeling. And it was very jarring for my system because I think I had an expectation around like, we teach self-development and empowerment and, people, self-empowerment. And I was expecting it to feel inclusive and loving, and much of it did, and a lot of it didn't. And it's kind of like that saying, like, don't meet your idols or your heroes kind of thing. And it just like reoriented what is this industry. But even more so, what ended up happening inside of my being was the little girl in me that was still wounded. Because newsflash, anybody that's in this work and teaches this work is doing it because they need it, right? Like, I'm not doing this because I am the master of like, and that's why I'm teaching it. It's like, no, I need this work for myself first and foremost. And that's my ultimate commitment. Which we'll get to as well. Even more so, I want to touch on that. But what it illuminated in me was like self-doubt and this piece of, what am I doing? What, like, is what I have enough? Or what my program, like, the parts of me that weren't yet fortified in my foundation of who I was, those cracks began to show because I started to question myself. And I went from being a fish out of water to very small fish in a very big pond. And when I was, when I was in Houston, like I was in the wrong pond, so I also wasn't in community. So it was just like my success was building online, but I had no framework for anybody else around me. And then suddenly when I'm thrust into the bigness that was this industry, and also feeling incongruence energetically with certain individuals, and feeling like there was massive layers of this, and I probably won't even get to all of them on this podcast, but there was a lot of spiritual jargon that was thrown around, and a lot and you know, a lot of charisma and forceful certainty is what I call it.
Yeah.
And yet it was like really incongruent energetically, because I could feel like certain aspects of it being out of integrity. And yeah, it was just super jarring. I went into also self-doubt, but at the same time, my business was still booming. So I paused the podcast, what was supposed to be a couple weeks, so I could like kind of get my ducks in a row. And I ended up doing, I think it was 5 retreats in 6 months. Either attending them with this mentor. I facilitated my own retreat, which was so phenomenal. This was like one of the best things I've ever done in my life, and I can't wait to host another one this year. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Was that a plug?
That was a plug.
Okay. Just making sure.
That's a plug. I don't know exactly when yet, but that's also holding me accountable. Where we had 20 women come in and have massive transformation over the 3-4 days. And so I was really deep in a retreat space as well, co-facilitating, attending, or facilitating myself. And I had gotten a breathwork facilitation certification, and yeah, I was growing rapidly on Instagram, which was crazy. When I moved to Austin, I think I had just hit 10,000 followers, and now we're at almost 60. So it was just like things were happening, even though I was paused in the show.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I could feel myself reorienting, of like I was becoming a different version of myself. So there was many, many layers that was happening within me, which was being thrust into this industry and it being amazing and expansive, but also putting me into spaces of some self-doubt. There was an underbelly of the industry that I got to see for the first time, where there was incongruence and things that were out of integrity, which made me begin to question this industry as a whole. And then there was being so burnt out by doing so many retreats, and like, and also at the same time feeling like the message that I had on the show before, while it was beautiful, I was beginning to outgrow some of the things in the ways that I was presenting energetically, and I couldn't quite figure out my new footing of who I was. So I was between this shedding and also this becoming.
Yeah.
And I was in this like liminal weird space between two worlds. And so, yeah, it was very interesting to be holding all of that at once.
Yeah.
And that just continued on until now here we are a year later.
Well, this is what I'll say, because you got thrown into a world, and you're actively right now being a pillar of integrity in that world, just by choosing to be in this conversation. Because I'm going to ask you a question that is a question you're not going to want to answer.
Okay, great.
And it's going to take you into a vulnerable area of conversation. But like, from the outside reflecting back in, it's fucking spiritual.
Yeah.
And that is why you have people that are waiting for you to come back, but waiting for you, right?
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing is like, there was all this shedding and a new Rachel that was coming out. And like, here's a version of her. What were you shedding?
Love that. And thank you for that reflection. So I've talked about this on the show before, but I don't think I understood how deep of wounding that this went within me. And maybe some of you will relate to this, but one of my deepest wounds is comparison. Well, comparison is kind of a byproduct of the deeper wound. The deeper wound is self-doubt and this belief where I'm not telling myself this, right? But like there's an insidious little piece and virus that somewhere in my psyche when I was young, I had this belief that I wasn't capable. And what that ended up doing was having me outsource my own inner knowing of what was true and aligned for me, and thinking other people outside of me had the answer, right? And I've talked about this on the show before, but I thought I had kind of overcome it because once I started to see success and people were, listening to my podcast and I was getting reflections from people and I'm facilitating and I'm coaching, I didn't think that was existing in me anymore. But then when I moved here to Austin, and I was also in a mentorship that I can touch on a bit, I, in my shadow, outsourced my own belief in myself, my own inner knowing, what was right, what was true, and instead started looking at everybody else and was like, oh my God, like, should I not have fucking the title of my podcast? Like, I was such a stand for that. And like, now I don't know. And I had all these opinions coming in and all of a sudden, all of these people were seemingly well studied. And many of them very, very much are. So I don't want to knock that, right? But there's also, that's a whole other conversation. But it illuminated in me, the self-doubt piece again. And the part of me like that thought everybody else had the better answer. And I got kind of stuck in this swirl of like, should I do it this way or this way? Or like, what do other people? And I got totally knocked off my center of what is true and right for me because I wasn't in communion with that part of me. I wouldn't even know, like that's new language even for me now. I would never have said that a year ago.
Yeah.
And ultimately there was kind of one big event that changed everything.
Okay.
And I had been in this swirl of fast, go, create. And I'm not obviously creating on the podcast, but there was so much happening behind the scenes with like the retreats that I mentioned and just how much I was in this world. And I was kind of dismantling some of the stuff I was seeing in this industry, and I was caught in between, like, I couldn't even hear my own inner voice at this point. Like, I was months into being here, and honestly, now looking back, I had lost sight of my own intuition, and I instead was like, what should I do? Oh, I don't know. Like, all these people know better than me. And I had in the mentorship that I was in, that was a lot of the dynamic. And I take full responsibility for outsourcing a lot of my knowing to this person. But at the same time, what I was seeing inside of the industry as a whole in some of the incongruences energetically with integrity, I saw inside of this mentorship. And I'm not going to talk about what the event was. There's no reason for that other than just to say, there was something that was illuminated to me that made me snap out of this and was like, what am I doing? Like, I do not feel in alignment with being here and being in this apprenticeship. I don't feel in alignment with the direction that I'm going. I can't hear who I am. Like, what is happening? And it was a split second. It was like I woke up, the rose-colored glasses came, like I found myself in this full swirl of like, Rachel, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I truly believe that the universe, God, source, whatever you believe in, takes us off our path just far enough so that we can illuminate the wounding that we need to heal, so that we can come back into our center and work with it and become actually more fortified, grounded, and free. Yeah. And that's ultimately what happened to me.
Yeah.
You were there. You were there for that. And, just to let you in, the listeners, I kind of, when I had the big event and I had that moment, it was this realization that the way in which I was operating and the world I was operating in was no longer in alignment for me. And I was ultimately faced with a choice. Do I stay And do I get the things that, because I was receiving a lot of things in terms of the connections, the celebrity guests, and like I had a lot of like beautiful carrots like dangled in front of me and being like, you're gonna have all this stuff, you're the next big thing, and could I have chosen to stay? That was a choice, and that would have been the easy choice. And I grappled with that for a couple of weeks of like, oh my gosh, like what if I speak my truth? What if I call out what I'm feeling and I walk away and I get blacklisted or I lose everything?
Yeah.
Right? And ultimately that fear is coming from an outsourcing of power, right? And believing that something outside of me has power over me. But that was a fear, like everything in my ego, everything in my little girl, all the things that like, oh my God, am I gonna speak this and walk away? Or am I going to do the easy route and am I going to stay and then slowly, back away slowly and not really say anything? And ultimately, there was no choice for me.
Yeah. You said that it flushed up something resembling losing your dad.
Yeah. Well, so before we even get to that, yeah. What I do want to ultimately say is I chose to end the mentorship early. And I chose to, I chose to leave. I chose to say that what was no longer in alignment for me. And I chose to essentially walk away from the entire life that I had been building for, at that point, 8 months. Because now in the story, we're in June 2023. And at this time, and I love that you brought this up because we'll go into it in just a second. But for context, at that time, we were about to launch the show. So I have like 10 interviews with like big name guests, right? And I like laugh at that now of like the whole hierarchy of this industry and like, but that's a whole, thing. But I have all these episodes that I'm sitting on that I will probably release most of them. It'll be funny for you guys watching this because I've since moved houses. We're in a different set. And also my energy is completely different. So it'll be interesting, like DM me and tell me if you can feel a difference because you totally can. Because this was before this whole thing happened. And I was kind of, I was just in a different energy at the time. But I was about to launch my program, Manifestation University again. We were about to launch another retreat. We were about to launch this podcast. And then the big event happened. And my soul was like, you will do none of it. Like, you will do nothing. And you were going to pause and you were going to sit here. And my ego wanted to freak out and be like, what are people going to think of me? And like, what, I just did all these interviews and like, what, I'm not going to release them. And I'm trying like all the stories and all the things. And I could just feel, no, like I ended up laying on the grass outside of my apartment in a field, staring up at the sky every day for like a month, just going, what just happened? And what is this world? And what is this industry? And who am I? And where do I fit in this? And there's clear wounding here that I wasn't seeing, that I get to now uncover and unfold. And I had to so completely surrender and trust that whatever was meant to happen, that I was in the greatest initiation of my life and I was in preparation for what was to come. And that, I had to so fully trust the inner knowing of doing everything the opposite of the way that people tell you to do. Like stop pushing, stop forcing, stop caring about what people are going to think, because I had to come back into devotion to my own inner knowing and devotion to my own intuition and be silent enough to listen to it and be willing to have all the stories, be willing to have people talk about me, be willing to look bad, be willing to burn it all down.
Yeah.
And burn it in devotion to truth. So, to go back to your question.
Sure, you can. You don't have to.
Well, no, it's good, and I'm glad you brought it up, and we just kind of skipped there, or skipped to that part. Is the wounding that I ended up uncovering.
Yeah.
Right, and so what I really want people to feel from this, and I guess like I also kind of want to share the lessons throughout, is like sometimes you have to be willing to walk through the fire of all of it. And you have to be willing to strip yourself completely away of your entire identity. Yeah. And you have to be willing to, look at all of the parts of you that you have hidden away in the shadows, because that's ultimately the point of all of this, is to become more free. It's not to teach. It's not to have the followers. It's not to get more downloads. It's not to look super good. It's not because when I get there, then I'm going to feel better because I have the accolades, because I've been in service. It's like, who am I even if I'm not facilitating transformation for other people? Mm-hmm. Like, where is that a shadow? Because I'm attached to my purpose. Like the willingness to strip away every part of the identity that I clung to of who I thought I had to be. And it took a while. So I laid on the grass for many, many days and just waited for the answer. I waited for a knowing. I waited. And I was, at this point, I was still serving one-on-one clients. But other than that, like, I stopped everything. And it took about a month. And this is so beautiful and cool to feel how the universe always provides. And when we trust in our own inner alignment and we are willing to break everything we've ever known and we're willing to say fuck it, in the liminal space, in the in-between, and in the unknown and uncertainty, there's so much beauty that can arise, and we are always provided for. And so about a month in, I was in connection with a coach that I had a financial coach of mine, actually, a money coach. And she was in her 60s and it kind of helped me through this process of unraveling and dismantling a lot of just the energetics that I had been in. And she said, I think there's someone I want to introduce you to, and he is the best psychosomatic therapist I have ever known. And he's 80 years old. And I think you should meet him. And so he and I got on a FaceTime, and to my surprise, actually, he hadn't taken on a new client. And I think it was like 5 years.
Wow.
And what I loved about him was I could feel his congruence. I could feel his alignment with his integrity. And I could feel that he was just coming from a place of service of his gifts, right? Because he had no social media. He had no need for validation or for followers. He was like so deeply in his alignment and was just serving at the end of his life.
Yeah.
And it was just instant, like a knowing that this was going to happen. And so I flew out to California and I did a week long of somatic therapy with him. And those of you who don't maybe know what somatics is, it's essentially the soma is the body. And we'll get into this too, of how this is going to change and inform like how I show up now and the energy and the way that I teach. But so much of the self-development industry and even the manifestation industry, it's from what we call a top-down approach, which is the mind, right? So let go of your limiting beliefs, subconscious reprogramming, hypnosis, like there's a lot like cognitive behavioral therapy, like all of these things, they're phenomenal, have changed my life. I personally teach them. They're epic tools, right? But all top down starts in the mind. But we ignore the body. So what somatics is it starts in the body. You don't need a story. You don't have to remember the first memory. You don't have to know the root cause of the issue, right? Instead, it is about feeling and sensing what's coming up inside of the body. And the body is what stores so much of, or stores all of our memories. And things can get lodged in our cells and in our DNA and in our nervous system. And if we don't deal with the body, and if we don't process through the emotions that are stagnant and stuck inside of our system, no amount of subconscious reprogramming is going to outprogram the body's response.
Right.
And I had gotten into somatics about a year ago, and I had gotten certified in somatic breathwork, and it was phenomenal for me. And I knew that I wanted to go deeper into this space. And so this therapist does psychosomatics, which is essentially a blend of both, right? So it's like kind of your normal talk therapy of what you would imagine, and then also going into the body and going into the sensations. And it was kind of a blend of all of it. And we spent a week together in California all day, every day I did therapy. And then when I got home, he had suggested to me, he's like, this is going to be the hardest, maybe hardest, transformational time in your life if you allow it to be. But you have to be so willing to go so far deep into your psyche. He had me agree, and I was ready. You know, I'm like, okay, universe,
of course you are.
I'm so ready. Like, bring it to me.
Of course you are.
Yeah, of course. And he said my suggestion, and I obliged begrudgingly, no input of any kind. Don't see a friend, no social events, no social media, no phone calls, no scrolling, no movies, like don't even read, no self-development, nothing. And I'm like, what? What do you mean, yeah. Right? And it was the most transformative thing I could have ever done for myself in my life. So I did 2 months of that, where every day I woke up at 8 a.m. I had a 3-hour session with him. I took a break for lunch, and then typically we would go back into another session from like 1 to 3 or 1 to 4 o'clock. So I was in session for 3 to 6 hours a day, Monday through Friday with him. And I also want to speak to, for the listeners, the privilege that is.
Yeah.
And I know that's not accessible to everybody. And I just so acknowledged, like, not most of us can take 3 months off from working and go directly deep into our psyche and be supported in that way. And so I really want to acknowledge the absolute divine privilege that is. And also acknowledge that you don't have to do this in order to overcome. Most people don't do this. And don't need to, right? Like even if you have such deep inner wounding, like listening to this podcast, having the tools, doing like a course, or even if you don't ever pay for anything, but you're listening to these things and you're applying the tools, you can absolutely transform your life. So I don't want people to then listen to this and compare themselves to me and think, oh my God, I have to take 3 months off and I don't have access to that, therefore I can't do it, and shut off the magic that this is. But for me, I know to my core that I am meant to be a steward of this work, and not like a teacher of like, I know, but like speak from the embodied experience of I've walked it, I've lived it, I've gone into the most broken places in my psyche, and I know what it feels to stitch it back together and to become so much more fortified, and I can speak from that place. So that I can bring it to the world, and that's my dharma, and that's my truth, and that's my mission. And so for me, it was an absolute requirement that I did this level of depth and dredging up those things because of who I'm meant to be in the world.
Yeah.
But it's certainly not something that you have to do, and I don't want anyone comparing themselves to me or my journey. But this was what was true for me.
Yeah.
And so in in that process of in those 2 months, I cannot even begin to explain to you what happens on like the 4th day.
Right.
So I would go through these cycles where I got to see every part of myself come out because I was just sitting there. All I did was cry in my bed, paint, draw, or lay on the grass. And at the time, my team, bless them, they were taking clips of old talks that I did and posting them on social media, like 1 a week, maybe 2 a week. Like sometimes maybe they wouldn't post any for a week or 2.
And they're going viral.
So meanwhile, you guys, this is such a mind fuck. Such a mind fuck. I'm completely off social media, deleted from my phone. Like I maybe would cheat a little. Like one time a week and I would go on my computer and just respond to a couple comments because I was like, let me just like do something that, keeps me somewhat tethered to community because I didn't want to just completely drop off the face of the earth, even though I like 90% dropped off. And yeah, it was just such a mind fuck because my community was growing. And so many of you listening to this podcast, you might be new and be like, I have no idea who this woman is. So if that's true, welcome. Hi, I'm excited to get to know you. But yeah, it was just bizarre to be so disconnected from life. Like I didn't see another person for weeks. Like I remember I had to call all my friends and say, don't invite me to anything because I'm not coming.
Yeah.
I didn't see anybody for a couple months. It was all of August, September, and half of October. And so now we're in mid-December. So it's been about 2 months of me reemerging and moving and all of that. I'm still feeling into circling back to your question about the wounding.
I said uncomfortable. Just remember, I was like, vulnerable question coming.
But I like it. No, I'm so down to be vulnerable and to be uncomfortable, but I want to also give context to the story.
Yeah.
And speak to the story of what happened. I want to drink water.
Yeah.
But within that, so I can get to this now of what I uncovered in myself.
Yeah.
There's something so interesting that happens when you have that long of time of being with yourself. And I experienced myself in cycles. So this wasn't like for the faint of heart. This was not cute like time. It was very much we would hit on something. We would hit on a certain wound, right? I'd be telling the story, whatever, and then we'd catch something that was a deeper wounding would make me feel something in my body. And the deeper we would go into it in the session, I would suddenly become 6 years old or 10 years old or 17 years old. And that emotion, I could literally feel a felt sense of what this work was actually saying on such a deeper level of what our emotions get stuck inside of our body and unprocessed. So that's why when your reaction is so disproportionate to the thing that happens, it's because the 10-year-old in you is freaking out when they weren't heard, or the 6-year-old in you feels so incapable because someone made fun of her, or the 17-year-old in you is so fucking angry. I'm speaking, these are the ones that I had.
Of course.
So fucking mad and angry and rageful.
Yeah.
And didn't get to process that experience in the moment. And all of us, pretty much, most of us on the planet have that. And what I personally uncovered in my own story was that I hadn't grieved my father's death. My dad died 12 years ago, and that was kind of the beginning of this journey for me. Not the self-development journey. An 8-year downward spiral came first until I was about 23. And, almost 13 years now that I'm realizing. But I had thought I had done a lot of grieving because I had cried a lot. And I had I've done everything under the sun. Like, I have acted out. I have been a absolute complete mess. I identified with being a mess. I rebelled. I tried to be good girl, Miss Perfect. Like, I've done every archetype you can possibly think of. And I realized, though, I never accepted his death. Mm-hmm. And what that ended up doing in my subconscious was creating, I was trying to recreate bringing him back in the men that I dated, in pedestalizing other people, specifically the masculine, but kind of everyone, right? There was this idea, the 17-year-old, 16-year-old in me believed that my entire life was ripped away from me and was angry about it. And in that ripping away, I felt like all the life I was supposed to have got gypped and got taken. And I never processed that. So there was also a part of me that was always looking for the answers outside of myself because I was looking for someone to save me. Mm. And I'll never forget, and I'm like, this also could be maybe a whole other episode, but we're just going there now, so whatever. I wear my father's wedding ring. So if you can see in the camera, this is my dad's wedding ring to my mother, and I've had it on for a decade. And my therapist one day, it was a particularly sensitive session just around my father and the anger of him leaving, also an abandonment wound because he died. I didn't think that was abandonment, but apparently it is, or can be perceived that way.
Totally.
Right? I would have never said it like that, but in the body and the little girl in me felt abandoned, right?
Yeah.
And he looked at me and he said, "Take the ring off." And I was like, I'm laughing now, but I was such a brat. I was like, no, this is the only thing I have left. And then I realized, oh my God, there's my attachment. Mm-hmm. And he said, that's the way you're keeping him alive because you're not willing to take it off and be your own person. And you're still waiting for him to save you. So it's showing up in the men that you're dating. It's showing up in the mentors that you have. It shows up in all of the ways that you're pedestalizing other people because you're waiting for him to come back and save you, and he's never coming back. And I wailed for 2 days on that one.
Yeah.
Just fully cried. And then I took off his ring and I set it on my nightstand for 2 months. Wow. And I found my own spine and I became my own person and I differentiated myself from the trauma and from needing to be saved in that way and accepted the fact that he was gone. And there's so many other things in my psyche also when he died pedestalized him because he was like my angel and he was perfect, but didn't accept all of the ways in which he wasn't perfect as a child that made me feel that I was incapable. That's a whole other thing. But so I was uncovering all these things around unworthiness and believing that I wasn't capable and believing that I had to be somebody else for him. And, just all of these different storylines and pieces. And I went back and essentially retrieved that part of me. And began to reintegrate and fill those cracks that had been illuminated this entire year. But they were filling with me, with the truth of who I was and my soul, and not because somebody else was giving me the answers or somebody else was saying that I was worthy enough or my numbers were saying that I was good enough. It was none of it mattered anymore because I was retrieving the little girl that was exiled and stuck and never got to process what she felt. And I was getting to actually feel what it felt like to reparent her in a way that I never fully understood. And what's really cool to wrap up this part of the story is obviously I'm wearing this ring now. But I left it off for 2 months. And, people had asked me, like, do you still have a relationship with your father after he's passed? Like, does he give you messages? And I do have a recurring dream that I've had for many years where my father and I meet on a park bench that's overlooking what I assume to be Los Angeles. Like, it looks like Mulholland Drive, if you're aware. But we meet on a park bench in my dream. He gives me the message that I need, and then poof, he's gone. And that's happened, I want to say maybe 5 times over 13 years. So it's very rare that it happens, but I mean, it's recurring, right?
Yeah.
But other than that, it wasn't like I had a deep communion or a deep relationship with him. And what I realized after I began to accept and truly process his death and actually come into my own center of who I am and who I'm not and who I'm meant to be and how I can support myself and take true ownership and responsibility for my life, my being, my soul, my integrity, like, and begin to walk that path in a deeply aligned way. Ended up happening is I began to be able to feel his spirit on the other side. And I always thought, like, and this, we're getting kind of woo, okay, but it's fucking spiritual. So
I think you're okay.
I don't go that woo on this show, but I think I'm feeling like this season we're going to be going way woo because there's also a whole Kundalini thing that we're not even going to talk about.
we have to.
We're gonna have to wrap it up. I also had a Kundalini awakening during this time. That's a side note. And people are gonna be like, "What?" Anyway,
it's a good story. You do need to tell that story.
I will eventually. We'll see. But anyway, I was always so angry, being like, what do you mean? I can't feel his spirit. I can't feel that. It was because it wasn't that he wasn't there. I felt abandoned because I always felt like my father's spirit wasn't really around. But it wasn't that. It was that I hadn't accepted and processed that he was gone.
Right.
And so I couldn't feel him because I couldn't accept that he was there on the other side. And so now, this happened in October, was when I could start to feel him and feel my grandma, who's also passed on as well. And now every day I'm like in communion with their spirit, and I'm in communion with their knowing and the truths, and I'm like checking in with them. Like, I can feel spirit in a whole new way now. And so I put this back on now as a reminder of the guide that I have, but not because I'm wishing for my dad to come back,
right,
but because it feels true and real that I can be in relationship and in right relationship with the form he is in now and receive that guidance. So to wrap all of this up, just me talking forever.
It's just an honor to see you.
Thank you.
Like, it's beautiful. You are actively walking the talk in this moment. And I'm getting to receive it, but they're also getting to receive it in whatever timeline. It's fucking beautiful.
Thank you.
And it's a testament to your vision and your commitment and who you are, no matter what.
Yeah.
Because what I see is that you started to feel wobbly and you were like,
yeah,
no, there's too much at stake.
Yeah.
My vision's too big, my impact, I know why I'm here. It doesn't get to wobble. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Will you talk about what it realigned into?
Yeah. Yes. So with all of this, and thank you so much for that reflection. It's just been so beautiful getting to sit here and like witnessing me and just sharing this. And I can feel your communion with my spirit and the truth of it. And that's why we're such good friends, is because you have this thread in you as well. And those of you listening to this, if this makes you feel something, it's because you have that thread in you, and you're a way shower, and you are a steward of the light, and you're meant to bring it to people. And I just so firmly feel and believe and know in my bones that the wobble and the getting off balance and getting stripped away and everything being reoriented is such a gift. It's such a gift. And it doesn't have to look in anybody else's timeline. And we don't have to be a slave to the idea of pushing and capitalism. And I have to have all these things. It's what I've come into knowing with is that the only thing that matters is devotion to your own truth. Nobody has the answers outside of you. What you are searching for and looking for and desiring and feeling is to be in relationship with your own soul and to be walking in truth with your own integrity and to feel in alignment with what is right for you. And nobody knows what that is except for you. And I'm really, with the intention of where we're going, there's so many different things that I want to say, but one, inside of this industry as a whole, and not just the spiritual industry or the self-development industry, I mean, just inside of our society and social media and the age that we're in is I'm really a stand for ushering in this new era of de-pedestalizing the guru, of de-pedestalizing the teacher and the student, right? Of, yes, it can be true that people have walked this path before you and they've paved the way. Yes, it can be true that people might know more language than you. They might be more embodied in a certain principle than you. Maybe you're finding this for the first time, but it's no one is better or worse than, and nobody has more answers or less answers. Some people have just been walking this path longer and maybe can help light a torch or show the way. But the second that we get into this idea of they have the answers, or as a leader, you can get really, when those followers come and when that money comes, you can get into this psyche of, I know what's best. And it puts that person can set themselves as the set point to salvation instead of let me show you your own light and truth that you've always had within you. And it's a very subtle energetic, but it is pervasive inside of this industry.
Yeah.
And so I want to talk to that and to speak to don't fucking listen to anybody if it doesn't feel true in your body. Just saying. And anybody that you listen to should be leading you back to the own divinity that you have in you. And my only job that I see for myself is to be in devotion to that divinity. And every time that I get off track, and every time that I'm my messy fucking human self, because I am, because that's the whole also point of it, is can I feel every single emotion inside of that? Every emotion is the map. It is the roadmap to freedom. And to be able to see and feel and be the observer of what is coming up inside of your body, inside of your mind, the rumination that happens, whatever is your specific flavor of wounding and patterning, all of it's a roadmap. And can we love all of it? And can we be accepting and welcoming of all of it? And can we feel it all the way through? And can we allow ourselves to then come back into devotion, truth, and love? And so that's where I'm going with who I'm being, and what I want this to serve. And it's so interesting too, because those of you that were here for the first 111 episodes, the first 18 months.
Damn.
So cool. And
damn.
We're going for another next 111.
Wow.
What's so cool is to feel the evolution of my being and also take you along with me on that journey, and to know that you are fully evolving. And I went through a whole death and rebirth with It's Fucking Spiritual, thinking, should I not have fucking the title? I don't know. And there was a part of me that came from an energetic before of, you can be a hot mess. I had these sayings, you can be a hot mess and a hot success. You can drink tequila and tap into the divine. And here's the thing. I'm all for your messiness. I'm all for, you want to drink alcohol, drink alcohol. I'm all for whatever is right and true for you in this moment. But what is also now true for me, it's I still drink, but like not a ton. It's like an occasion, right? Like that's being taken out of the branding. I'm not a hot mess anymore. I'm not. And I'm not going to claim that, and I'm not going to affirm that. I'm in my spine, and I'm in my truth, and I'm able to hold myself. Am I messy? Yes. Am I human? Yes. Yeah. Oh my fucking God, will we be talking about that? This entire podcast, this entire episode has been about my humanness and being raw and real. And that's what it always stood for. But there was an energetic behind me being like, you know?
Yep.
And that served and supported at that time, because I think it also really helped to extend a hand to those people that felt that way and said, hey, we can still go on the journey together. And you can. If you still identify with like, I'm a fucking hot mess right now, like, listen, baby, I was there for a fucking decade. I get it. And it was fully a part of my journey. And I'm still a messy as fuck human being, but I'm not a hot mess.
Yeah.
And that like makes me feel something, because I can just feel I just feel how much work I've done on myself to get to this point. Yeah. And I feel how much I trust myself now. And I'm just so excited to bring that to this community and to the show and to my little sliver and corner of the internet and the world. Yeah. So that's how we're changing. That's the energy that we're coming with. And it's going to inform all of my teachings. And so, yeah, I've touched on this a bit throughout the episode, but how I got really deep into somatics, and I got really deep into nervous system regulation and into parts work and internal family systems and all these different modalities that I don't need to sit here and like ramble through right now. But essentially, the frequency of the work that I'm bringing is changing, specifically because my level of embodiment has deepened. Yeah. And it's not just about like manifesting the vision board or reprogramming the subconscious. We will still do subconscious reprogramming. It's a big part of my work. But I'm going to start teaching emotional release and how to work with the different parts of your psyche and how to help like dislodge somatically some of the feelings that are stuck inside of the body. Like the work that I'm going to be facilitating now is going to be informed from a much deeper place and hold a much deeper capacity, because my capacity has expanded as an individual and and as a person walking this path. So I'm excited for that. Brand new programs coming in 2024. Specifically around, how to repattern your nervous system to hold what it is that you're calling in, and how to really trust yourself in your own knowing, and how to create and manifest the life that you want, but not from this fluffy, like, here's like the subconscious, like letting go of your limiting beliefs. Like we are letting go of your limiting beliefs. Yes. But the way that it's taught is just going to be so much deeper and with so much more community aspect and really bringing us all back into relationship with our bodies and into wholeness and creating from that place. And it's so much easier.
It truly is.
It's so much easier.
I was with somebody was like, it's so much easier to release something when you don't have to relive the moment. And that's what you can do with somatic release. You don't have to know exactly what you're releasing to be able to release it. And
that's so beautiful. That's a whole other episode. But you don't have to know the story.
You don't have to know the story.
Which pissed me off so much when I was doing this work. They're like, when was the first time do you remember? I'm like, I don't fucking know, Sharon. Listen, like, I don't have a whole lot of memories because it's called trauma. Like, so it was... That was a whole other thing.
Oh my, poor note. Sharon.
But yeah, sorry, Sharon. Any Sharons listening to this, that was rude. But anyway, yeah. So that's a story. That's who I am now, and it'll be forever evolving. And I guess my commitment to you and to this platform is to just always trust in my own knowing and to always share from truth and to hopefully be permission giving, to pause when you are feeling the need to pause, to not have to do it the way everybody's telling you that you have to do it, to to come back home to yourself in such a massive way. And my commitment is just to honor the truth that is coming through and to honor your truth. And if this resonates, amazing. And if none of it resonates, also amazing. Like, I'm not sitting here claiming to have the right story, the right truth. This is just what feels real for me in this moment in time right now. And that is my devotion and service to you. So, yeah.
It's beautiful.
Thanks.
It's going to be a season.
It's going to be a season.
Let's just hope every season you don't have to do a whole year of rebirth in between. I mean, maybe.
Who knows? But I'm not going to put that out there. Like, I'm really hoping to, this was, I know there will be cycles and I know there will be many, many deaths and rebirths, but this one felt like a really big one and a really necessary one. And it feels like there was It's Fucking Spiritual Baby Rachel 1.0. And this feels like a really massive rebirth and 2.0 version of myself and the brand and the becoming. And hopefully we won't have to take a year off next time.
Well, welcome back.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here and being my beautiful buffer. And thank you so much for being here for me, for all of it. You really were such a pivotal part of my journey and helping me to come back to my truth. And it would not have been the same without having you as a friend to hold me through it. So thank you.
Thank you. It means a lot. It was easy.
Get yourself some really amazing friends and community, okay, guys? That is one thing that I found in Austin that I feel so lucky and so fortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So cool. Okay. That's it. That's the first, technically second episode, I guess.
Real episode.
Full episode. First full episode. Here's the story. I'm so excited to be with you guys this season. And we're going to have amazing guests. And we're also going to do a lot of solo episodes, but I promise that we will always keep it really real. And my commitment also to the show is to only have people on the show that I feel their integrity, their congruence, and their alignment, no matter how many followers they have, no matter like how big they are in this industry. If I'm only doing it if I feel a true congruence with how they show up in the world. So that's also my commitment to you and to the show. And I love you guys. And if you tuned into this, thank you so much. For all of you who are new to my world, welcome. For all of you that have been with me from the very beginning or sometime in the first season, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your patience with me. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for, listening and just being in this community. I love you so much. I'm so excited to continue to serve and support and be walking this path alongside you as we, come into communion with our souls together. So I love you, and I'll see you in the next episode.
You crushed it.
I waited so long to say that. Wow. Thank you for listening to the It's Fucking Spiritual podcast. I am so glad that you're here. And if this episode resonated with you, I invite you to share this with a friend that you feel needs to hear it. And if you are really feeling the love and support for this show, this podcast thrives off of your listens and your reviews. So I would love if you could leave us an honest review. We would love to hear your feedback, your thoughts, your questions, and it helps us get this podcast in the hands of more people and would mean so much to me to receive your support. So thank you.